September 28th, 1870, Lexington, Virginia. Rain is hammering the slate roof of the President's house at Washington College. It is a cold, relentless Appalachian rain that turns the dirt roads of the Shenandoah Valley into a slurry of red clay and horse manure. General Robert E. Lee enters the stable. He is soaking wet. He has just walked back from a vestry meeting at Grace Episcopal Church, a mundane obligation for a man who used to move armies across maps. He is 63 years old, but he looks 80. His face is flushed, the veins in his neck pulsing with the silent hydraulic pressure of advanced heart disease. He walks to the stall. The horse, Traveler, nickers, a low guttural sound deep in the throat. This is not a pet welcoming a master. This is a soldier acknowledging his commanding officer. Lee rests a hand on the horse's flank. The muscle beneath the grey coat twitches. The horse is warm, the man is cold. Lee leans his forehead against the animal's neck, closing his eyes against the angina pain radiating down his left arm. For a moment, the sound of the rain on the roof sounds like the distant roll of musketry at Chancellorsville. He feels the pulse of the only living creature that truly understands the solitude of the years 1861 to 1865. Lee knows he is dying. The doctors speak of venous congestion, but Lee knows the truth. The engine is seizing up, and standing there breathing in the scent of the horse, a terrifying thought grips him. It isn't about his legacy or the lost cause or the college. It is about the logistics of survival. Who, he wonders, is going to protect him when I am gone? Because outside those stable doors, the world has gone mad. To the weeping crowds, Traveler is a holy relic. To the souvenir hunters, he is a trophy to be carved up. To the circus promoters, he is a ticket sale. If Lee dies, the shield protecting this animal vanishes. The line between history and a sideshow is thinner than the general's patience, and the wolves are already waiting at the gate. To understand the grim, grotesque fate that awaits this animal, we have to strip away the marble statue mythology. We have to look at the mechanics of the animal himself. Go back to the beginning. West Virginia. The autumn of 1861. The war is young. It is messy. The uniforms are not yet grey. They are a mix of militia blues and homespun browns. Lee is not yet the legend. He is a struggling commander dealing with rain, mud, and incompetence in the mountains. He sees a horse. The animal is named Jeff Davis by his owner, but Lee ignores the politics. He looks at the conformation. The horse is a 4-year-old American saddlebred, born near Blue Sulphur Springs. He is a powerhouse. Deep chest, short back, strong loins. He is what horsemen call a good doer, an animal that keeps weight on even with poor forage. Lee pays $200 in gold currency, a staggering sum when paper money is already starting to flutter. He renames him Traveler, spelling it with the double L in the British style. This is the moment the bond is sealed, and it is a bond based on physics, not sentiment. Lee is a heavy man. With his saddle, pistols, binoculars and overcoat, he weighs nearly 200 pounds. He rides with a long leg, barely using the stirrups, balancing by the grip of his thighs. He needs a horse that is not just strong but smooth. Traveler is possessed of a peculiar gait. He doesn't trot. A trot jars the rider's spine. Traveler has a rapid, springy walk. It is a fast shuffle, almost a rack, that covers 6 miles an hour without shaking the rider. For a general who spends 18 hours a day in the saddle, this is not a luxury. It is a tactical necessity. It means Lee can think, plan, and observe without physical exhaustion clouding his judgment. But Traveler is difficult. He is high-strung. He is terrified of sudden movements. He requires a firm hand. Lee, the master of emotional repression, finds his perfect match in a horse that is all nervous energy, held in check by discipline. 1862, 1864. The mythology tells us Lee and Traveler floated above the battlefield. The reality is gritty, dirty, and exhausting. Think of the logistics of the Army of Northern Virginia. By 1863, the blockade is strangling the South. There is no grain. The horses are eating corn stalks, tree bark, and dry grass. Traveler begins to change. The sleek grey coat becomes rough. The ribs begin to show. But he never stops. May 1864. The underbrush is burning. The air is so thick with smoke you cannot see 10 yards. The noise is deafening. A continuous ripping roar of rifled musketry. Lee tries to lead the Texas Brigade into the counterattack. He spurs Traveler forward. The men scream, "Lee to the rear! Lee to the rear!" Traveler is frantic. The noise, the heat, The smell of burning flesh, it triggers every flight instinct in the herbivore brain. He rears, he plunges, but Lee sits like iron. He grips the reins, his face a mask of cold fury. The soldiers grab the bridle, physically forcing the horse back. In that moment, Traveller is not a symbol. He is a terrified animal being driven into the mouth of hell by a man who has decided that death is preferable to defeat. The horse is foaming at the mouth, his eyes wide, white-rimmed, rolling in panic. Lee forces him to stand. This is the burden of command, forcing the living to endure the unendurable. Winter, 1864. The glamour is gone. The war is now a trench stalemate. It is freezing. The mud is knee-deep. Traveller stands in a makeshift shelter, shivering. There is no hay. Lee writes to his daughter that he is feeding the horse bits of bread from his own table. The general is losing weight. The horse is losing weight. They are fading together. The quiet professional is now a survivalist. Traveller learns to sleep standing up in the freezing rain. He learns to ignore the constant thumping vibration of the mortar fire. He becomes hardened, just like the scarecrows in the trenches. April 9th, 1865. The road to Appomattox. This is the nadir. The army is dissolving. Men are dropping their muskets and walking into the woods to die or to find food. Lee rides Traveller. They have been on the move for a week, relentlessly, day and night. The horse is gaunt. His hip bones jut out like coat hangers. His coat is matted with the red dust of the Virginia Piedmont. They arrive at the McLean house. Lee dismounts. He hands the reins to an orderly, Sergeant Tucker. He adjusts his uniform, a new dress uniform he saved for this specific catastrophe. He walks up the steps to surrender his army. Traveller waits in the yard. Consider the psychology of the animal in this moment. For 3 years, the sound of guns meant movement. It meant adrenaline. Now there is silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. He stands there for hours. He paws the ground, tearing up the soft spring grass of Wilmer McLean's front yard. He chomps at the bit. He doesn't know the war is over. He is still waiting for the order to charge. When Lee emerges, the Union officers snap to attention. Grant takes off his hat. Lee mounts Traveller. The horse feels the weight of the man, but the man feels heavier now, the leaden weight of defeat. A low moan rises from the Confederate troops as Lee rides back into the lines. Men reach out to touch the general's boot, to touch the horse's flank. They are weeping. Traveller becomes skittish. He tosses his head. He doesn't understand the grief. He only understands the crowd, the pressure, the claustrophobia. This is where the trouble begins. 1865-1870. Lee moves to Lexington to take over Washington College. He brings Traveller. He builds a new stable connected to the house. He ensures the horse has the best stall, plenty of oats, and fresh straw. He tries to give the veteran a retirement, but the arrogant antagonist of this story is not a Union general. It is the public. The cult of celebrity descends on Lexington. Traveller is no longer just a horse. He is the physical embodiment of the lost cause. Lee allows Traveller to graze on the college lawn. It seems like a kindness. It is a mistake. Tourists arrive. They stand at the fence. They stare. Then they trespass. They want a relic. They want a piece of the sacred beast. They sneak up on the grazing animal and yank hairs from his tail. They cut locks from his mane with pocket knives. Imagine the irritation. The horse is grazing peaceful, and suddenly a sharp pain rips through his tail. He kicks, he bites, he becomes dangerous. Lee is furious. He writes letters complaining about the depredations of the visitors. But he cannot stop them. He is a public servant now, and the public demands access. Traveller becomes a prisoner of his own fame. He can only be safe when Lee is riding him. The rides become their escape. Every afternoon, at 4 p.m., Lee mounts up. They ride into the Blue Ridge Mountains. Away from the students, away from the widows, away from the letters asking for money or explanations. Up in the hills, the old man and the old horse find a rhythm. The rapid, springy walk returns. Lee talks to the horse. He tells him things he cannot tell his wife or his former officers. He confesses his doubts, his weariness. The horse listens, his ears flickering back to catch the familiar voice. They are two broken veterans keeping each other alive. October 12, 1870. The stroke hits Lee on September 28th. He lingers for 2 weeks. Traveller stands in the stable, waiting. The rides have stopped. The routine is broken. Horses are creatures of habit. When the habit breaks, anxiety sets in. He paces the stall. When Lee dies, the town goes silent. The funeral is the largest event in the history of the valley, but the most gut-wrenching sight is the procession behind the hearse. Traveller is led out. He is saddled with the deep-seated Grimsley saddle Lee used during the war, but the saddle is empty. Boots are placed in the stirrups, reversed toes pointing backward, the symbol of the fallen warrior. 2 old soldiers lead him. He walks with his head down. Observers note that he doesn't prance. He doesn't fight. He seems to sense the finality of the box in the wagon ahead of him. They bury Lee in the chapel. The doors close. Traveller is led back to the stable. He is unsaddled. He is put in his stall, and he waits. Summer 1871. Winter passes. Spring comes. Traveller is now the property of Lee's daughter, Mildred. She loves the horse, but she is not a horseman. She is a grieving spinster, overwhelmed by the legacy she has inherited. Traveller is 14 years old. He is stiff in the joints. He spends his days in the pasture, fighting off flies, waiting for a master who never comes. Then the accident happens. It is June. The ground is hard. While grazing, Traveller steps on something. It is a small thing. A rusty nail. A sharp piece of scrap metal. A thorn. It punctures the frog of his hoof. The soft triangular shock absorber in the center of the foot. The wound is small. It barely bleeds. A groom cleans it, maybe puts some pine tar on it. It seems fine, but deep inside the wound, in the airless darkness of the puncture, Clostridium tetani spores wake up. They are everywhere in stable soil, in the manure, in the dirt, but they need an anaerobic environment to thrive. The puncture wound provides it. The bacteria begin to multiply. They release a neurotoxin called tetanospasmin. It enters the bloodstream and latches onto the motor neurons. It begins to travel up the nerves toward the spinal cord. For days, Traveller looks normal. It begins with a subtle stiffness. Mildred notices the horse seems wooden. He walks as if his legs are stilts. Then the third eyelid, the nictitating membrane, flickers across his eye. It is a classic sign. The grooms call the vet. They call the old cavalryman. The men take one look and turn away, sickened. They know what this is. They saw it in the battery horses after Antietam. They saw it in men who took shrapnel in the leg. Lockjaw. The pathology of tetanus in a horse is a horror show. The toxin blocks the inhibitory signals in the spinal cord. This means the muscles can contract, but they cannot relax. The masseter muscles in the jaw clamp shut. Trismus. The horse cannot open his mouth. He cannot chew. He cannot drink. He stands over the water trough, desperate with thirst, unable to lap up a single drop. The stiffness spreads. The neck muscles lock, pulling the head up and back. The tail sticks out straight, rigid as a broom handle. The legs are splayed out like a sawhorse to keep him from falling. Mildred Lee writes in her diary, panic rising in her script. He is getting worse. The suffering is terrible. They try to help. They make a gruel of bran and warm water. They try to pry the teeth apart to pour it down his throat. It is impossible. The jaw is fused by the spasm. The sensory overload is the worst part. Tetanus makes the nervous system hypersensitive. A slamming barn door, a thunderclap, even the touch of a hand triggers a violent full-body seizure. The muscles contract so hard they can snap bone. The horse sweats profusely, soaking the straw, his eyes wide with terror, trapped inside a body that has become a torture chamber. The question hangs in the humid air of the stable. Why not shoot him? It is the merciful thing to do. Any other horse would have been put down days ago. A single bullet behind the ear. Instant peace. But this is not any horse. This is General Lee's horse. The weight of the legend stays the hand. Who can be the man to kill Traveller? The vet refuses. The family refuses. They are paralyzed by the symbolism. They cannot bring themselves to execute the last living connection to the general. So they let him suffer. They act out a tragedy of good intentions. They rub him with liniment. They cover him with blankets. They whisper to him. But the biology is ruthless. The toxin paralyzes the diaphragm. Breathing becomes a ragged, shallow gasp. June 27th, 1871. Traveller collapses in the straw. He can no longer stand. The spasms have exhausted his heart. The mighty engine that powered him up the hills of West Virginia and through the fires of the wilderness finally gives out. He dies. Not in glory, but in the filth and agony of infection. The story should end here. A grave, a marker, silence, but the arrogant antagonist, human curiosity and lack of respect, has one more act. They bury him in a ravine behind the college. It is a damp, unceremonious spot. 4 years pass. The flesh rots. The leather of the halter disintegrates. In 1875, a rumor starts among the students. The bones are out there. It is the era of amateur naturalism. Museums are filling up with skeletons. A group of students, or perhaps a local doctor, decides that leaving such a famous skeleton in the mud is a waste. They go to the ravine with shovels. Visualize this scene. It is grotesque. They dig up the decomposing remains of the general's horse. The smell is atrocious. They pull the ribs, the femur, the skull from the wet clay. They don't rebury them in a better spot. They box them up. The bones are shipped north to Rochester, New York, to a taxidermist named Ward. The irony is staggering. The bones of the ultimate Confederate warhorse are sent to the Union to be bleached, drilled, and wired together by Yankee professionals. When the skeleton returns to Lexington, it is not treated as a relic of a hero. It is treated as a curiosity. It is mounted in Brooks Hall, the University Museum. It stands there on a wooden platform, a stark white scaffold of calcium, and the vandalism begins again. For nearly 100 years, the skeleton stands exposed. There is no glass case initially. Students, continuing the mindless tradition of the hair pullers, now take out their pocket knives. They carve their initials into the bones of General Lee's horse, JW 1905, KA 1928. The femur, the shoulder blade, the ribs, they become a graffiti wall for fraternity pledges. The quiet professional is mocked in death by the very people who claim to revere the general. Decades pass, the wire rusts, the bones turn yellow and brittle. The skeleton begins to droop. In the 1920s, the museum burns. The skeleton is saved, but it is damaged. It is moved to the basement of the Lee Chapel. It sits in a storage room, gathering dust, next to broken chairs and old mops. It is a shameful secret. The university doesn't know what to do with it. They can't display it. It looks ghastly. They can't throw it away. It's traveler. Finally, the timeline reaches the modern era. 1971. It is the centennial of the horse's death. The Civil War centennial has just passed. The mood in the country is changing. There is a desire to correct the sins of the past, to treat history with dignity. The administrators of Washington and Lee University make a decision. Enough is enough. They construct a concrete vault. Not in a ravine, not in a basement, but right outside the Lee Chapel, but May 8th, 1971. It is a quiet Saturday. There is no brass band, no speeches. A simple wooden box is brought out. Inside are the bones. If you look closely, you can still see the carved initials, the scars of the souvenir hunters, the drill holes of the taxidermist. The box is lowered into the ground just a few yards from the crypt where Robert E. Lee sleeps. They pour concrete over the vault. This is the final logistical move. Concrete to stop the diggers. Concrete to stop the vandals. They place a plaque on the grass. It is simple. Traveler horse of General Robert E. Lee, 1857-1871. The stable doors at the chapel are often left open now. The university says it is to allow the spirit of the horse to wander. It is a nice sentiment, but the reality is in the ground. Lee once wrote, "Traveler is my only companion. I may also say my only pleasure. He and I, whenever we go out, wander along in the bypaths and seek out the hidden recesses of the mountains." Now finally, the logistics are balanced. The man is in the crypt. The horse is in the lawn. The tourists still come, but they can only look at the stone. The bones are safe. The long ride is over, and the silence at last is absolute.